As you guys can see here, Bitcoin has been fighting the 50 SMA and the 50 EMA, with the 50 EMA now becoming a resistance line at $43,627. If Bitcoin is unable to claim this area back and try to rally above the 50 SMA, I suspect we are more than likely going to be moving down towards that 200 EMA. So for clarity, guys, the 50 SMA, the bullish target for a closure above this level, is $43,756. Failure to kind of do this, and if we do see rejection up in this range of the 50 EMA at 43,626, I suspect a move down towards the 200 hourly EMA at $42,987. So as you can kind of see, Bitcoin has been kind of consolidating down in a bit of a ranging market. It's kind of been bouncing around a little bit. It did actually break above the 44,283 up towards 44,398, as you can kind of see in this upper area just here. Okay, but ultimately, it's actually been stuck in a bit of a range, right? It's just kind of bouncing around. Yes, it's kind of wicked up here, but it didn't close above this level. Likewise, it's come down into these lows, most recently coming down into a new swing low than the previous low around the 21st of December at 1700 hours UTC. But ultimately, it hasn't breached a new low called low on the 20th of December at 2000 hours UTC. And so we find ourselves in just this ranging market. Now, the good news for the bulls is that a ranging market like this would be a continuation pattern, essentially meaning that we'll just kind of go sideways, bouncing between these upper and lower areas until eventually we get that breakout to the upside. Now, that's going to be probably the understanding of what is going on here, but it doesn't always play out that way. Sometimes these can fail and can break on down. And for me, this wick is the one thing that could basically say that that was the breakout, and therefore a breakdown is also a possibility. Okay, so all eyes are going to be on that swing low at $43,230, because that's going to be the area where we can see a new breakdown, a new bear market, or a new local low in this continuation pattern. Like this is a new local high in the continuation pattern. And so that would be a very disappointing move. But again, this market is very difficult to get a good read on these smaller hour timeframes. And so with BTC here, we can also acknowledge that there is the potential to kind of look at this now as a downward trend line. Okay, and again, all eyes will be on breaching this and trying to close above this trend line so that we can break that idea. Okay, in the same way that you saw this upward trend line here getting tested or broken and then tested as resistance, right? So all of this testing that's happening up in this higher area just here is an indication as to a previous trend line that was support, got broke, and now is resistance, and then basically that resistance starts to form a downward trend line. And so it's going to be interesting to see whether this area here with two touch points at the moment, there and there, okay, as you can kind of see the higher range being 44,398, and the second touch point on this trend line comes in at $44,048. So we could come up here, we could probably test it again and get rejected, and you can kind of see slippage down towards our 200 EMA. Now, the other thing to kind of bear in mind is if we draw a trend line in at the bottom here, it is kind of coming in a bullish way. Okay, this is a descending triangular wedge pattern, which will have a break to the upside coming from it. So again, if we do coil up here, and maybe we have, you know, as you see at the moment, we've kind of got ourselves a couple of touch points just down here at the bottom of this trend line, here, and of course over here, that if we do, you know, have another touch up here around that 50 SMA, and then come back down towards our lower trend line on the 200 EMA by the time that occurs, we might find this as our big support and big break to the upside, where we'd have the possibility of breaching $44,700, which is something that I didn't think we were going to see anytime soon. But it does look like it is potentially on the cards here for BTC to push up higher than $44,700, which, as I said, it wasn't something that I thought was going to happen, but I can see a path potentially there. So for Bitcoin here, it's looking very, very interesting for that potential move to the upside, but I suspect we probably do have to move on down first. Let's go ahead and just quickly sense check what that might look like. And you can kind of see, yeah, I would say that our target range, the range that I would expect Bitcoin to kind of move down to, maybe not right away, but eventually will be between 42,008, 43 and 43,071. It's going to be basically that 200 EMA and of course the lower end of this trend line. I expect only really the higher side of this to potentially get tested out over the weekend, because I don't think this is going to last all that long. I do expect us to kind of get called up for maybe early next week. We'll see how that kind of goes. Maybe there'll be a blast tomorrow to the upside before the 25th of December. We'll see how it kind of plays out. Can't time the market, but we can see that things are definitely progressing quite nicely here on the 1 hour time frame. We've got some momentum, but being the weekend and being the festive holiday season, it's unlikely that this is going to amount to too much. Hopefully I'm wrong, and maybe we do see a bit more volatility, but I wouldn't be expecting it, and I'll be very surprised if we do see that. Ultimately, our stochastic is more than likely just going to bounce around a little bit, as you can kind of see here. Now, throwing the divergence indicator on, we can see that we had hidden bullish divergence just over here. We did obviously rally on up, and of course nothing else from there. So for the most part, our daily time frame isn't anything to kind of note. Volume profiles are still decreasing during this entire move. Again, it's pretty positive to keep us in check for a break to the upside. There isn't a lot of activity going on here, and that's going to be what corrects your stochastics and your RSIs a lot quicker. Okay, let's roll this up into the daily time frame, right? So the daily time frame, we did have our range here at 42,401 to 44,146. We were talking about moving up into the upper area. We still failed to close above this range. We have a few wicks in there. Again, it's all kind of as expected. Nothing much more than that at this point in time. It's all looking interesting in terms of the price action, but very corrective. So we're in the range. We're looking for rejection here, and I am ultimately going to be looking at longer term plays to the downside at this point. We do have momentum to carry on up higher than 44,700, so we always kind of say we look for that break to the upside. We might push up a little bit more into this slightly higher range, kind of topping out around 45,456 to a potential low of around 42,976, which we're already in that larger range, as you can kind of see. So for the most part, we are right where we need to be. We might push up a little bit more. That's okay. But I am looking for moves to the downside and moves to the break down from these highs that we find ourselves in at the moment. Okay. Ultimately, looking at 39,600, if I can get my words out today, to $40,000. That's going to be this little yellow box area here. And you can see the 50 EMA and the 50 SMA, the red being the EMA, the yellow being the SMA, both 50 in measurement, coming in at the 39,390 for the SMA and 39,472 on the EMA. So everything's kind of coming together right down here to find support. Now, if Bitcoin, and this is a really important note, right? We have to kind of pay attention to this point because there's a lot of support to be found at $40,000. But if Bitcoin was to lose this area, well, unfortunately, it's going to be a bit of a tumble from there. So Bitcoin is basically going to have to try, and the bulls are going to have to try to make sure that they hold above $40,000. Anything closing down lower than this is going to be very, very difficult for BTC. As the next key area, a fair value gap sat between 35,735 and 37,650 is going to be the key thing to look out for. Maybe support can be found there. If you can't, then you're looking at that 200 EMA, which is currently 32,624. And again, another fair value gap all the way here at 30,250 to 32,832. And so, yeah, so as you can kind of see on our daily chart, lots of things going on, lots of things to kind of be thinking about. And ultimately, if Bitcoin can't hold 40K, then it's going to be a bit of a tumble to the downside, which I suspect will happen. Now, taking a look at the divergence indicator, we did see hidden bullish divergence before we had this most recent move to the upside. Otherwise, nothing else really flashing up on the daily time frame there from the divergence indicator or anything like that. So all looking good. Move this up into the weekly time frame. In here, we're still in the parallel channel on the higher range of the channel. We are looking for moves to the downside. As you guys know, we are looking at that mid-level, and we are looking at that first kind of key area between $36,000 and $37,000 on the weekly time frame for good support. If you lose that, really are looking at a tumble towards 30 to 31, which we know is that fair value gap as well. So again, this is going to be a key area for support. It also happens to fall in line with the 50 SMA, the 50 EMA, so those are looking good. Underneath there, you have your 200 EMA sat at 26K, and you also have this next interesting range at 24,750 to 26,850. That is essentially going to be our next area of major support to be found. If you lose all of those, unfortunately, we are then talking about taking a tumble to 19,005 to 21,007, and that's going to be the key area that if Bitcoin bulls can't hold even that, then yeah, you're talking new lower lows at those points. So lots of things to be thinking about here. On this journey to the potential downside, which I do see unfolding. Now, we're heavily overbought on the weekly stochastic RSI. As you can kind of see here, it's only just starting to turn down, but ultimately we are looking for much more healthier corrections than this. We've been through this yesterday as well, in terms of how a 40 to 50% correction is something that we should be expecting. It isn't an unusual thing. We've been talking about it for a very long time, and yeah, we are expecting it to see it, regardless to ETF and stuff like that. And simply because no one's really waiting for the ETF to be approved before investing. They're investing on the speculation that it's going to be approved. And so therefore, everyone who was going to invest has already invested. And therefore, when this news does come out of a Bitcoin approval, we're more than likely not going to see an influx of new capital coming in on the news, but instead probably a lot of people trying to sell their positions on the news. Sell the news, buy the rumor. That is what they say. Or buy the rumor, sell the news. So taking a look at this, we can see, yeah, we're overbought. We're looking for the corrections to the downside. We throw the divergence indicator in here. Now, there's no divergences, but I do want to stress just how high this RSI is. Okay, the relative strength index is overbought. Okay, if I zoom out of this just a little bit, you can see the last time that we were this overbought, we were up here at $65,000. Again, we saw what happened afterwards. Okay, now we know that the $69,000 is a part of a totally different play, but for the most part, we can see that we were started to correct on down from our weekly RSI being overbought, and we saw a very healthy correction and a pretty deep one. I think this is basically as lunar. No, this was Celsius, I think. Celsius or lunar? Maybe it was lunar. Lunar and Celsius at the same time. A 55% move to the downside here, right? And again, we could see bearish divergence setting us up for this move to the downside as well. Now, we don't see that here, but we know that we are overbought in the same way that we were previously. Now, maybe that one's not enough for you, right? Maybe you're looking a little bit further back. You can see very similar levels right up here before we had a 53% reduction. Okay, so whether you want to take a look at what happened in 2019, which is probably the one that a lot of people will be looking at, they'll be looking at this rally to the upside followed by a 53% reduction in price. And that happens to be exactly where the RSI, so the relative strength index was at that particular point in time up here. That means that where we are right now is ahead of looking for a 50% correction in Bitcoin, in my opinion. I'm going to talk a little bit more about this tomorrow with capitulation and a few other ways of looking at it. So just bear in mind, we are looking for corrections. We are looking for tumbling down here, and it's going to wreck a lot of retail investors who just do not understand how these markets work. So that is kind of where that sits for now. I think that is going to wrap up today's video, simply because, well, I think there's going to be more important things to talk about down in the Discord server, and we'll do another update video on capitulation tomorrow and taking a look at some different metrics that we haven't covered on this channel before. If you found this useful, informative, smash that like button. If you're new, subscribe. Don't forget to join us down in Discord. Link is in the description below, and I'll catch you all in the next one.